Hey, I'm Barrett, or Crimson Zero X in the Discord, and or the Elated Guild Leader. If you know me, you know me. If you don't, you don't. Deepwoken has a huge glaring problem right now, and it isn't mage builds, it isn't blood rend, or anything like that. It's actually attunementless. The way attunementless is set up in the current meta, it just completely discourages players from playing with an element. Why? Because attunementless players just have it all. On screen now should be a build I made in like less than a minute. With all the HP cards this build can take, plus the fortitude seen on every single attunementless build, this build gets an incredible 160 HP from stats and talents, 30% penetration negation, and a whole bunch of posture. And what do they lose offensively for running these stats? Oh, nothing. They lose nothing offensively. In fact, they really only gain offense. Almost every single attunementless mantra in the game roll catches and does damage equal to or better than most attunement mantras. On top of that, the build I made has almost every single talent you need to fight in the entire game, just minus charisma. Attunementless just does like Attunementless just has like this incredible amount of flexibility in text that attunement players just don't really have. In the current meta, every build needs to have at least 520 HP, 40% resistances, and 30 posture to be even remotely good in chime or ganks. Your average attunementless build can look upwards of like 570 HP or more, 55% resistances, and 36 posture. Does that sound fair to you? I mean, you might think it does because you're choosing not to use an element in the element based fighting game, which you're partially right, I guess. But if you look at players using attunements, then you understand that you have it way easier than all of us. To be clear, I'm not saying we should nerf attunementless. I'm saying we rework the progression and mastery of attunements so that they feel on par to attunementless. Just looking at attunements right now, sorry, they just have way too many talents. What makes attunementless so flexible is that they don't need 20 element cards for their builds to have basic functionality. But without those cards on an attunement build, the build is missing a crucial part of their functionality and probably won't win any chime matches. The attunementless players get to pick and choose all their HP and posture talents, while attunement players have to painstakingly decide whether or not something is droppable for the same HP or posture cards. In order to fix the noticeable power gap between attunements and attunementless, I've come up with 5 different ways to bridge the gap between attunements and attunementless. My first method is pretty plain and simple, I guess. Quests. Some of these are already in the game, like the Pleatsky Follower, who teaches you how to eat mantra ingredients for ether, or the Gale talent, which makes your boat go faster. But I mean meaningful talents. Quests would help players pick cards that actually matter for their builds, while letting the meaningful but also miscellaneous talents be discovered through quests. Cards I have in mind to be obtained through quests are kind of like Dancing Steps, Arrow Gliding, The Old Wind, Condensation Drip, Discovery of Fire, etc. You know, things you want on your build but aren't necessarily worth sacrificing one of those HP or posture cards for. My second method revolves around card merges. Attunements seriously just have way too many talents, and the devs know this too. They quite frequently merge talents, but they'd never merge the useful ones. Things like Flaming and Explosive Finish, Inhale and Aftercut, Mirage and Exploding Mirage clones do not need to be separate cards. Most of these talents are necessary for attunement builds, but they take up so much room on your builds that you can't afford to take those HP or posture cards. Therefore, they should be merged. My next method may be where some of you start to disagree with me, but that's fine. My next method revolves around elemental mastery. In other words, at certain milestones in your elemental progression, you start to automatically unlock some talents. An example would be like all the Flourish talents at 20 element, like Flaming, Glacial, and Shadow. They all unlock at 20 respective element. And things like Agitating Spark, Flame Within, and stuff like that, unlocking around 40. Or Phoenix Flame, Shadow Travel, Orbital Ice, and so on, automatically unlocking at 75. Again, it would save talent card slots that would be considered mandatory on most attunement builds, so they have some extra room for those HP and posture cards. And I've saved these last two for a reason, and here's where attunementless players are gonna start like bitching and complaining in my DMs, which is again fine. I don't really care. But my fourth method is mantra attuning. The basis for this idea is that by mastering your element, or having 80 invested into it, it should allow the player to attune attunementless mantras to that respective element. The attune mantras will proc lesser status effects than pure attunement mantras, but will receive a damage buff and will be able to be leveled to max level from having 80 element and not the old stat. For example, a fire imbued master's flourish. While the player only has 50 medium weapon, because the mantra is attuned with 80 flame charm, the mantra can be leveled to 5. This system is mainly the direct punishment for going attunementless, as attune players can utilize straight better variants of their moves. It would also make mantras like weapon mantras more viable on attunement builds, because you really just don't see a lot of people taking them on your attunement builds. Nobody's taking like Flash Draw Strike on like a Thundercall medium build. Lastly, I really just have like a treat for dual attunement players. You know, these guys really have it the worst out of like every player in Deepwoken, and I want to fix that somewhat. We've gotten a dual attunement path before, Shadow Fire, but it makes no sense to me how your fire and shadow become one, yet you can't get level 5 mantras on both. In most cases, a player will be running 40 shadow, 80 flame, or vice versa. This means that half of your path as a whole is mostly deadweight, unless you're running like Rising Shadow or something. Which introduces my fifth and final idea, elemental synchronization. Elemental synchronization is a system I came up with where two attunements that share paths together can have level 5 mantras if one attunement has at least 80 invested to it and the other has at least 40. By implementing this idea, the other half of your mantras won't be completely deadweight. You can use your shadow guns and rising shadows at the same time as your fire mantras, because by picking dual attunement path, those two elements are one and the same in your body. It just makes sense. You still need to level up your element in order to get the better talents for that element, but if you want level 5 mantras on dual attunement builds, then it just shouldn't be that big of a hassle. This system only really works if there's more dual attunement paths, but for now this would really only work with Twisted Puppets and maybe Arc Order by a stretch. Because, they kind of blueballed us when they released Twisted Puppets. You'd really think they'd make more of those dual attunement paths, like Thunder Lightning or Ice Gale or something stupid like that. And, if this video is well received, I have a Google Doc like filled to the brim with dual attunement path ideas, and I'm more than happy to share them. As a day one player of this game, I want to see as much cool magic shit as there can be in the cool magic shit game. If you have any questions or want to give me your second cent, then my Discord is Reth, that's RETTH, or Crimson_0x in the Deepwoken Discord. Till then, I've been Barrett, and thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Hey yo,